Modern selling systems: how to sell consistently without manipulation, hype, or luck. Have you ever wondered why selling feels harder than it should? Why the more pressure you apply, the more resistance you feel? What if the problem isn't the market, but the way selling has been taught for decades? Introduction. For a long time, sales has been framed as combat. A battle of wills, a contest where someone wins and someone loses. But that model is breaking. Today's buyers are informed, skeptical, and exhausted. They don't need more persuasion. They need clarity. This audiobook is not about tricks, scripts, or manipulation. It's about replacing pressure with professionalism, replacing hype with systems, and replacing luck with repeatable skill. Selling, at its highest level, is not persuasion. It's leadership. And that's where we begin. Chapter 1. What selling really is, and why most people get it wrong. What if selling was never meant to be about convincing people at all? What if the moment you try to persuade someone, you actually make the sale harder instead of easier? This single assumption changes everything about how selling works and why so many people struggle with it. For decades, selling has been misunderstood and poorly taught. Most people believe selling is the act of taking someone who is uninterested, uncertain, or resistant and, through words, pressure, or personality, turning that person into a buyer. This belief shapes behavior in subtle but damaging ways. It frames selling as a contest. One person tries to win. The other tries to protect themselves. From the very beginning, the interaction becomes adversarial. In this model, the salesperson pushes forward with arguments, features, and enthusiasm. The buyer responds by pushing back with objections, delays, and skepticism. The more one side applies pressure, the more the other side resists. Trust erodes before it ever has a chance to form. Modern selling does not work this way anymore. Selling is not about convincing. It is about diagnosing a problem and determining whether there is genuine alignment around solving it. When alignment exists, selling feels calm and logical. When it does not, no amount of persuasion will create a good outcome. To understand this shift, it helps to think about the difference between a salesperson and a doctor. If you walk into a doctor's office complaining of a headache, the doctor does not immediately recommend surgery or medication. They ask questions. They listen carefully. They gather information. They look for patterns. Their goal is not to sell you a treatment, but to understand what is actually happening. Only after the diagnosis is clear does the doctor prescribe a solution. And because the diagnosis makes sense, the patient does not argue with the prescription. They do not negotiate the treatment or ask for discounts. They ask a simple and practical question. When can we begin? Effective sellers operate the same way. They do not rush to present solutions. They do not pitch before understanding. They examine first. They diagnose first. They treat selling as a professional process, not a performance. Today's buyers enter sales conversations with skepticism, and for good reason. Years of exaggerated promises, aggressive tactics, and disappointing outcomes have trained buyers to be cautious. This skepticism is not personal. It is biological. The human brain is designed to detect threats, and sales interactions often trigger that response automatically. When a salesperson approaches with excessive enthusiasm, urgency, or pressure, the buyer's defenses increase. High energy does not always communicate confidence. Often, it communicates need. And need makes buyers uncomfortable. To build trust, pressure must be lowered. Tone must slow. Intent must become clear and consistent. Trust is built through clarity, patience, and professionalism, not excitement. Traditional selling focuses on getting agreement as quickly as possible. Modern selling focuses on determining whether a fit actually exists. Traditional selling relies on persuasion and charisma. Modern selling relies on calm authority and curiosity. Traditional selling pushes features and benefits. Modern selling explores problems, impact, and consequences. Traditional selling creates resistance. Modern selling creates collaboration. The modern buyer lives in a state of overload. Information is everywhere. Pricing, competitors, reviews, and opinions are all accessible within minutes. While buyers are informed, they are also overwhelmed. Decisions that should feel simple often feel heavy and complex. Most buying decisions now involve multiple people, each with their own priorities and fears. This complexity creates decision fatigue, and when fatigue sets in, the safest choice often feels like doing nothing at all. Even more important is the way buyers protect themselves. Many decisions are defensive in nature. Buyers are not only optimizing for performance or growth. They are protecting their reputations, their roles, and their careers. They are quietly asking which decision is least likely to get them blamed if something goes wrong. Your role as a seller is not only to highlight potential upside. Your role is to reduce perceived risk and make change feel safer than staying the same. Selling is not a personality trait. It is not reserved for extroverts, performers, or natural talkers. Selling is a skill. It requires listening, pattern recognition, discipline, and emotional control. Charisma may open doors, but it cannot guide complex decisions over time. Systems outperform talent because systems are reliable. Talent fluctuates. Systems do not. When you rely on a system, performance becomes repeatable instead of emotional. Selling works best when trust replaces pressure. The less you try to force an outcome, the more buyers engage willingly. Modern selling is calm, ethical, and professional. It relies on truth instead of tricks, and clarity instead of manipulation. In the next chapter, we will go deeper into the psychology of modern buyers and explore what truly drives their decisions beneath the surface. Chapter 2: The Psychology of Modern Buyers. What really drives a buying decision? Is it logic, data, and spreadsheets, or is there something deeper happening beneath the surface? If decisions were purely rational, selling would be simple. Present the facts, show the numbers, and the best option would always win. But that is not how real decisions are made. We like to believe that business decisions are logical and objective. We imagine executives calmly weighing pros and cons, calculating return on investment, and choosing the most efficient path forward. In reality, most decisions are driven first by emotion and only later justified with logic. This is especially true in complex buying environments, where risk, uncertainty, and visibility are high. At the center of most buying decisions is a quiet but powerful emotion: fear. While the business case may be framed around revenue, efficiency, or growth, the human case is about safety. Buyers worry about how a decision will affect their reputation, their workload, and their standing inside the organization. They are thinking about what happens if things go wrong. A chief financial officer fears approving an expense that looks wasteful in hindsight. An IT leader fears security issues, failed implementations, and late-night emergencies. A sales leader fears missing targets because the team does not adopt the new tool. These fears are rarely stated openly, but they shape every question, objection, and delay. If your sales process focuses only on logical gains and ignores emotional safety, it will fail. Buyers do not move forward until they feel protected. They need to believe that a decision will not expose them to unnecessary risk. They need to feel confident that they can defend the choice internally if challenged. One of the biggest obstacles modern buyers face is decision fatigue. The human brain has limited capacity for processing new information. When buyers are presented with too many options, too much detail, or too many unknowns, mental strain increases. As cognitive load rises, clarity decreases. The brain looks for relief, not optimization. When this happens, buyers often default to the status quo. Staying with what already exists feels safer than making a change, even when the current solution is clearly flawed. This tendency is known as status quo bias. The effort required to change feels greater than the discomfort of staying the same. Inaction becomes the easiest option. In this environment, your biggest competitor is often not another vendor. It is no decision at all. To overcome this, your role is not to add more information. Your role is to simplify. You must reduce complexity, narrow choices, and guide the buyer toward a clear and manageable path forward. Another critical insight into buyer behavior is the sequence of decision-making. Emotion comes first. Logic comes second. Buyers imagine a future state and how it will feel. Relief, confidence, stability. Once that emotional decision is made, logic steps in to justify it. Data, charts, and financial models are used to explain a decision that has already been emotionally accepted. Many sellers get this backward. They lead with logic and hope emotion will follow. They overload buyers with features, metrics, and technical details, assuming this will create confidence. More often, it creates confusion. Emotional commitment must come first. Logic exists to support it, not create it. Loss aversion plays a powerful role in this process. People feel the pain of loss more strongly than the pleasure of gain. Buyers are more motivated to avoid losing time, money, or credibility than they are to pursue equivalent gains. This is why highlighting the cost of inaction is often more effective than promising future benefits. However, this must be handled carefully. Aggressive fear-based messaging can feel manipulative and increase resistance. The goal is not to scare buyers, but to clearly and calmly show the risks of staying the same. When done correctly, the current state begins to look risky, and change begins to feel like the safer option. Psychological safety is the foundation of progress. Buyers move forward when they feel understood, not judged. When a buyer admits to a challenge, attacking the problem too aggressively can trigger shame. Shame shuts down honesty. Instead, effective sellers normalize the struggle. They show that the problem is common and understandable. This removes embarrassment and opens the door to real conversation. When buyers feel safe, they share more accurate information. They talk openly about budget, timelines, and internal concerns. They stop posturing and start collaborating. This level of honesty cannot be forced. It must be earned through empathy and consistency. People do not buy when they fully understand your product. They buy when they feel that you fully understand them. Understanding creates trust. Trust reduces fear. And when fear is reduced, decisions become possible. In the next chapter, we will focus on how trust is formed in the earliest moments of a sales interaction and how credibility can be established without pressure, performance, or ego. Chapter 3: Building Trust Before You Pitch. Why do some people feel trustworthy almost immediately, while others create resistance the moment they start speaking? Before a buyer evaluates your product, your pricing, or your proposal, their brain is already deciding whether you are safe to listen to. That decision happens faster than most people realize. Trust is not a vague or abstract concept. It is a biological response. When trust is present, the brain releases chemicals that lower defenses and increase openness. When trust is absent, stress responses activate and the brain shifts into protection mode. This assessment happens almost instantly, long before logic enters the picture. First impressions are shaped primarily by tone, pace, and intent. Buyers are highly sensitive to signs of pressure. When a seller sounds rushed, overly eager, or approval-seeking, it signals risk. The buyer may not consciously register this, but their body responds. Defenses rise, skepticism increases, and the conversation becomes guarded. To build trust, pressure must be removed. Calm, steady delivery communicates confidence. Speaking clearly and decisively, without rushing or over-explaining, signals competence. Trust grows when the buyer senses that you are not dependent on the outcome of the conversation. Many sellers believe trust is built by proving how impressive they are. They lead with credentials, awards, and long lists of past clients. While these details may establish legitimacy, they rarely create real trust. Authority that relies on self-promotion often feels insecure. True credibility is demonstrated through understanding. When you accurately describe a buyer's reality, they assume you have helped others like them. Insight builds confidence faster than any resume. Asking thoughtful questions and reflecting what you hear shows that you are present and capable. Listening is the most underrated trust-building skill in selling. Most people listen while preparing their response. Effective sellers listen to understand. They allow pauses. They do not interrupt. They give the buyer space to fully explain their concerns. This changes the tone of the entire interaction. When buyers speak, they often reveal more than they intend. Small phrases point to larger fears or constraints. Reflecting those words back, or naming the emotion underneath them, makes buyers feel seen. Feeling understood lowers resistance and increases openness. Trust is built moment by moment. Every interaction either strengthens it or weakens it. Small inconsistencies matter. Missing a follow-up time, running meetings longer than promised, or being vague about next steps creates friction. Reliability creates comfort. Comfort creates trust. Consistency is more powerful than charm. Charm may make a good impression, but consistency creates predictability. When buyers can predict your behavior, their anxiety decreases. They relax into the process because it feels controlled and safe. Honesty plays a critical role in trust. Saying no when something is not a fit, admitting limitations, or pushing back on unrealistic expectations demonstrates integrity. When buyers see that you are willing to protect them from a bad decision, your recommendations carry more weight. Trust cannot be rushed. It grows when buyers feel that your goal is not to close a deal, but to guide them toward the right decision, even if that decision does not involve you. When trust is present, persuasion becomes unnecessary. In the next chapter, we will focus on how to conduct discovery conversations that uncover real problems, create clarity, and naturally move buyers toward action without pressure. Chapter 4: Discovery. How to ask questions that sell. Why do some sales conversations feel productive while others feel like polite but pointless exchanges? Often, the difference is not the solution being offered, but the quality of the questions being asked. The way a seller conducts discovery determines whether a conversation leads to clarity or stalls in confusion. One of the most common mistakes in selling is presenting a solution too early. The moment a seller hears a surface-level problem, there is a temptation to respond with features, benefits, and explanations. This approach feels efficient, but it creates resistance. When a solution is introduced before the problem is fully understood, the buyer instinctively begins defending the status quo. Effective discovery is not about gathering information for a pitch. It is about understanding the real problem and the consequences of leaving it unsolved. Without this understanding, even the best solution feels unnecessary or risky. People do not buy products for their features. They buy them to make progress. Behind every request is an underlying objective. A buyer may ask for a tool, a report, or an integration, but what they truly want is a specific outcome. They want to avoid embarrassment, reduce stress, improve performance, or gain confidence in their decisions. To uncover this, sellers must move beyond surface questions. Asking what someone needs is rarely enough. The more important question is why that need exists and what happens if it is not addressed. This shift changes discovery from interrogation into exploration. Good discovery feels like a conversation, not an interview. Questions flow naturally from what the buyer has already shared. Language remains open and curious rather than sharp or demanding. When buyers feel guided rather than examined, they stay engaged. Understanding the impact of a problem is essential. A technical issue may be inconvenient, but inconvenience alone rarely motivates action. The real driver of change is impact. Lost time, missed opportunities, increased risk, and personal pressure create urgency. Until these consequences are clear, there is no compelling reason to move forward. Impact exists on multiple levels. There is the immediate problem, the broader business effect, and the personal or strategic consequence. When all three are understood, the problem becomes real and meaningful. This is the point at which buyers begin to care deeply about solving it. Insight plays a powerful role in discovery. Often, buyers are aware of symptoms but not causes. By asking questions that reveal hidden connections or overlooked constraints, sellers create value before any solution is presented. When a buyer realizes they have been looking at the problem incorrectly, trust and credibility increase. Challenging assumptions must be done carefully. The goal is not to prove the buyer wrong, but to expand their perspective. When done with respect and curiosity, this approach positions the seller as a peer rather than a persuader. The most effective sellers speak less than they listen. They resist the urge to fill silence. They allow buyers to think, reflect, and articulate their concerns fully. This patience creates depth and clarity. Discovery is where selling truly happens. When done well, the solution feels obvious. The decision feels logical, and the path forward feels safe. In the next chapter, we will focus on how to communicate value clearly and simply, so buyers can understand, explain, and justify the decision with confidence. Chapter 5: Communicating Value Clearly and Simply. What makes one explanation feel clear and convincing while another feels confusing or forgettable? In many sales conversations, the problem is not the product or the price. The problem is how value is communicated. When buyers feel confused, they hesitate. When they hesitate, they delay. And when delays pile up, deals quietly disappear. In a crowded and noisy market, clarity is more persuasive than excitement. Buyers are constantly exposed to bold claims, dramatic language, and exaggerated promises. Words like revolutionary, cutting edge, and best in class are everywhere. Over time, these words lose meaning. They add noise instead of understanding. Clear communication, on the other hand, reduces effort for the buyer. And when effort is reduced, decisions become easier. Value is not created by describing what a product does. Value is created by explaining what changes for the buyer after the product is in place. Features describe capability. Outcomes describe impact. Buyers care far more about impact than capability, especially when they must justify a decision to others. Every feature should connect directly to a real outcome. If that connection is missing, the feature becomes forgettable. A buyer may nod in agreement during a demonstration, but later struggle to explain why the solution matters. When buyers cannot explain value in simple terms, they lose confidence in the decision. Clarity improves when communication mirrors the buyer's language. Using internal terminology, acronyms, or technical jargon creates distance. Even when buyers understand the terms, processing them requires effort. Effort increases cognitive load. As cognitive load rises, confidence falls. The simplest language is often the most effective, not because buyers lack intelligence, but because simplicity signals understanding. One of the most effective ways to communicate value is to anchor it against the cost of the current situation. Buyers are already paying for their problems, whether they realize it or not. They pay in wasted time, missed opportunities, operational friction, and personal stress. When these costs are clearly articulated, the price of a solution feels smaller by comparison. Value becomes tangible when it is broken down. Instead of presenting a single abstract benefit, effective sellers explain how different elements contribute to the overall outcome. Support, onboarding, training, and guidance are often just as valuable as the product itself. When buyers see the full picture, they better understand what they are paying for. Pricing often creates anxiety, not because of the number itself, but because of uncertainty. Buyers want to know what they are getting and why it costs what it costs. When pricing is introduced without context, it feels risky. When it is introduced after value is clearly established, it feels logical. Too many options can undermine clarity. While choice feels empowering in theory, it often creates hesitation in practice. When buyers must compare multiple packages, features, or configurations, mental effort increases. Simplifying choices reduces anxiety. Guiding buyers toward a clear recommendation shows confidence and leadership. When presenting options, structure matters. Buyers want to understand what problem each option solves and who it is best for. When this is clear, choosing becomes easier. Highlighting a recommended option based on the buyer's stated needs reduces fear of making the wrong decision. Repetition plays an important role in clarity. Buyers rarely absorb everything the first time they hear it. Restating key points using consistent language reinforces understanding. Each repetition should simplify, not expand. The goal is not to impress, but to be remembered. Clarity also depends on restraint. Adding more information does not always add more value. In many cases, it does the opposite. Knowing what to leave out is as important as knowing what to include. When buyers feel overwhelmed, they disengage. When they feel guided, they lean in. Clear value communication allows buyers to confidently explain the decision to others. It arms them with simple language and logical reasoning. This internal alignment is often the final barrier to action. When buyers understand exactly what changes, why it matters, and how it reduces risk, the decision stops feeling complex. It feels obvious. And when the decision feels obvious, momentum builds naturally. In the next chapter, we will explore how to ethically influence decisions without pressure, manipulation, or urgency, and how to help buyers move forward while maintaining trust and integrity. Chapter 6: Ethical Persuasion Without Pressure. Why does pressure so often backfire in sales? The harder someone pushes, the more resistance they create. This is not a coincidence. It is a natural human response. When people feel their autonomy is threatened, they instinctively protect it. In sales, pressure does not accelerate decisions. It slows them down or stops them entirely. There is a critical difference between influence and manipulation. Manipulation uses psychological tactics to benefit the seller at the expense of the buyer. Influence uses understanding to help the buyer move toward a decision that is already in their best interest. The difference lies in intent. Ethical persuasion exists to reduce friction, not to manufacture urgency or fear. Selling follows a basic law of human behavior. Push creates pushback. Pressure invites resistance. Urgency triggers defensiveness. When sellers attempt to force movement, buyers retreat emotionally, even if they continue to engage politely on the surface. Ghosting, delays, and vague objections are often symptoms of pressure applied too early or too aggressively. Movement happens through pull, not push. Pull works by reconnecting the buyer to their own stated goals. Instead of imposing timelines or demands, the seller reflects the buyer's priorities back to them. When the next step is clearly tied to something the buyer already cares about, progress feels voluntary rather than forced. Ethical persuasion frames decisions in terms of safety and alignment. Buyers are naturally loss-averse. They want to avoid mistakes more than they want to pursue gains. However, constantly highlighting danger or loss can feel manipulative. The more effective approach is to show that staying the same carries its own risks, while moving forward restores stability and control. When change is framed as a return to safety rather than a leap into uncertainty, resistance decreases. Buyers begin to see inaction as the risky option. This shift is subtle but powerful. It allows the seller to guide the decision without applying pressure. Transparency plays a major role in ethical influence. Buyers become suspicious when requests feel unexplained or self-serving. Providing clear reasons builds trust. When you explain why a question is being asked or why a step is necessary, you remove doubt about your motives. This openness makes the process feel collaborative instead of transactional. One of the most effective ethical techniques is the willingness to step back. When a seller openly acknowledges that a solution may not be the right fit, it disrupts the buyer's expectation of pressure. This creates psychological safety. Buyers relax because they no longer feel hunted. Paradoxically, this often increases interest rather than reducing it. Saying no builds credibility. It signals confidence and integrity. When sellers protect buyers from poor decisions, their recommendations gain weight. Buyers listen more closely because they know agreement is not automatic. Ethical persuasion also respects timing. Not every problem needs to be solved immediately. Forcing urgency when none exists damages trust. When urgency is real, it should come from the buyer's reality, not the seller's quota. Aligning next steps with genuine constraints keeps the process honest. Autonomy is central to decision-making. Buyers need to feel that they are choosing, not being led. The role of the seller is to clarify options, consequences, and paths forward, then allow space for choice. When buyers feel in control, confidence increases. Pressure creates resistance. Clarity creates movement. Ethical persuasion removes obstacles instead of creating fear. It helps buyers act on decisions they already know make sense but feel hesitant to make alone. In the next chapter, we will explore how objections should be handled with confidence and calm, and how resistance can be transformed into productive conversation rather than conflict. Chapter 7. Handling objections with confidence. Why do objections feel so uncomfortable for so many sellers? Often, objections are treated as rejection, when in reality they are signs of engagement. A buyer who raises concerns is still thinking, still evaluating, and still involved in the decision. Silence is far more dangerous than objection. An objection is not a stop sign. It is a signal. It indicates that something is unclear, unresolved, or risky in the buyer's mind. When sellers react defensively or emotionally, they confirm the buyer's fear that pressure is coming. When sellers respond with calm curiosity, objections become opportunities for clarity. The first step in handling objections effectively is allowing them to fully surface. Interrupting, correcting, or rushing to respond shuts down honesty. Buyers need to feel heard before they can feel reassured. Pausing, listening, and acknowledging the concern communicates respect and control. Validation does not mean agreement. It means recognizing that the concern is reasonable from the buyer's perspective. When buyers feel validated, their emotional intensity drops. This creates space for rational discussion. Many objections are symptoms rather than root causes. Price, timing, and authority are often placeholders for deeper uncertainty. Before responding, it is essential to understand what the objection truly represents. Clarifying questions reveal whether the issue is financial, strategic, or emotional. Price objections are rarely about the number itself. They are about perceived value and risk. If the value is unclear or the risk feels high, the price will feel too expensive. Addressing price effectively requires reconnecting it to outcomes, impact, and the cost of inaction. Some objections are defensive tests. Buyers want to see how confident and stable the seller remains under pressure. Concessions offered too quickly weaken credibility. When sellers hold their ground calmly and seek mutual agreement, trust increases. Comparison objections often arise when buyers are overwhelmed by options. Instead of attacking competitors, effective sellers refocus on fit. The question shifts from which option is cheaper to which option actually solves the problem with the least risk. Requests for more information can signal hesitation. Sending large volumes of material without clarity often delays decisions. Guiding the buyer toward what matters most keeps momentum intact. The need to think is another common objection. In many cases, it signals unresolved concerns. Addressing this gently by narrowing possibilities helps move the conversation forward without pressure. Trust-based objections require patience. When buyers are unfamiliar with a company or solution, social proof and credibility help reduce uncertainty. Demonstrating stability, consistency, and transparency reassures buyers without exaggeration. Effective objection handling follows a simple rhythm. Listen fully, acknowledge the concern, explore the underlying issue, respond with relevance and honesty, then confirm that the concern has been addressed. This calm and structured approach keeps the conversation productive. Objections are not barriers to overcome. They are conversations to navigate. When handled well, they deepen understanding and move decisions forward. In the next chapter, we will explore how deals should be closed naturally, without pressure or dramatic techniques, and how commitment can emerge as the logical next step rather than a forced conclusion. Chapter 8: Closing the Sale Naturally. Why does the word closing make so many people uncomfortable? It suggests finality, pressure, and persuasion at the very moment when trust matters most. In reality, the end of the sales process should not feel like an ending at all. It should feel like the next logical step in a well-understood journey. When closing feels difficult or awkward, it is usually a sign that something earlier was missed. Strong closes are not created by clever language or last-minute tactics. They are the natural result of clear discovery, honest alignment, and shared understanding. When those elements are in place, commitment feels obvious rather than forced. The idea of closing as a separate skill has caused more harm than good. When sellers believe they must switch into a different mode at the end, buyers sense the shift immediately. Pressure rises. Defenses return. Momentum slows. In contrast, when the entire process has been collaborative, the final agreement feels calm and professional. Commitment emerges when both sides are clear on the problem, the impact, and the path forward. The buyer understands what will change, why it matters, and what is required to make it happen. At this point, the role of the seller shifts from persuader to coordinator. One of the most effective ways to support this transition is by making the process visible. Buyers often hesitate not because they disagree, but because they are unsure what happens next. Uncertainty creates friction. Clarity restores confidence. Outlining the steps from decision to implementation reduces anxiety. When buyers can see how a solution moves from agreement to real value, the decision feels manageable. Breaking this journey into clear actions, responsibilities, and timelines transforms a vague commitment into a concrete plan. This shared plan creates alignment. It turns the conversation from seller versus buyer into two parties working toward the same outcome. Missed steps and delays become logistical issues rather than emotional ones. Progress feels structured rather than risky. Many deals stall near the finish line due to practical obstacles. Legal review, procurement processes, internal approvals, and scheduling conflicts are common sources of delay. These are not objections. They are predictable friction points. Addressing them early demonstrates professionalism and prevents last-minute surprises. Directness is important at this stage. Avoiding the ask creates confusion. Buyers appreciate clarity when the path forward is clear. Direct language communicates confidence and respect. When asked calmly and at the right moment, commitment does not feel pressured. Once agreement is reached, restraint matters. Continuing to sell after a decision has been made can introduce doubt. New information, additional features, or unnecessary explanations may trigger second thoughts. Confidence is reinforced by simplicity. Closing is not about winning. It is about mutual agreement. When the decision aligns with the buyer's goals and feels safe to execute, commitment follows naturally. In the next chapter, we will explore how follow-up can be used to maintain momentum, create value, and prevent deals from quietly fading after initial interest. Chapter 9: Follow-up that builds momentum. Why do so many promising deals fade away after a good conversation? Why does interest turn into silence, even when the buyer seemed engaged and positive? In most cases, deals do not die because of rejection. They die because of neglect, confusion, or poorly executed follow-up. Follow-up is where most sales processes quietly fail. Not because sellers do nothing, but because what they do adds no value. Messages that say, "just checking in," or "following up on my last email," communicate only one thing: the seller wants something. They do not help the buyer think, decide, or move forward. Over time, these messages train buyers to ignore future outreach. Effective follow-up serves a very different purpose. Its goal is not to remind the buyer that you exist. Its goal is to maintain momentum, reinforce clarity, and continue reducing uncertainty. Every follow-up should move the buyer closer to a decision by making the process easier, safer, or clearer. Buyers are busy. Their days are filled with meetings, internal priorities, and unexpected problems. Even when a purchase matters, it can easily slip down the priority list. Silence is often not a signal of disinterest. It is a signal of overload. Understanding this changes the emotional response to non-replies. Instead of frustration, effective sellers respond with structure and patience. Follow-up works best when it is intentional and planned. Hoping that a buyer will respond on their own creates randomness. Randomness kills consistency. Professional sellers assume that follow-up will be required and design it into their process from the beginning. The most important principle of effective follow-up is value. Every touchpoint must give the buyer something useful. This could be insight, clarity, reassurance, or perspective. When follow-up consistently adds value, buyers stop seeing it as pressure and start seeing it as support. Value-based follow-up often continues the conversation rather than restating it. It connects new information to previously discussed concerns. It shows that the seller is thinking about the buyer's situation, not just their own outcome. This reinforces trust and credibility over time. Educational follow-up is especially effective. Sharing relevant insights, examples, or observations helps buyers make sense of their problem. It positions the seller as a guide rather than a pursuer. The key is relevance. Generic content creates noise. Specific connections create impact. Proof-based follow-up builds confidence. Buyers want to know that others like them have made similar decisions successfully. Real examples reduce perceived risk. When buyers can see themselves reflected in another customer's story, uncertainty decreases. Proof reassures without persuasion. Insight-driven follow-up deepens understanding. Sometimes, after a meeting, new connections become clear. Thoughtful follow-up can surface these insights in a calm and helpful way. This shows care and competence, and it keeps the decision moving forward without pressure. Follow-up should not rely on a single channel. Email alone is easy to ignore, especially in crowded inboxes. A balanced approach that includes email, phone, and professional networking platforms increases visibility without becoming intrusive. The goal is presence, not persistence for its own sake. Timing matters. Following up too quickly can feel impatient. Waiting too long allows momentum to fade. Consistent spacing creates rhythm. Rhythm creates familiarity. Familiarity builds comfort. Silence should never be taken personally. Emotional reactions lead to inconsistent behavior. When sellers feel rejected, they often pull back completely or push too aggressively. Both extremes reduce effectiveness. Detachment allows for steady and professional follow-up. A structured follow-up sequence removes guesswork. When the next step is predefined, execution becomes easier. This structure also reduces emotional fatigue. Sellers no longer wonder when or how to reach out. They simply follow the process. One of the most powerful follow-up techniques is the respectful disengagement message. When a buyer has gone silent, a calm message that removes pressure often reopens communication. By giving the buyer permission to disengage, the seller reduces tension. This frequently prompts a response, even if the response is a delay rather than a commitment. If the buyer re-engages, the conversation continues with renewed clarity. If the buyer confirms that priorities have shifted, the seller gains closure and frees attention for other opportunities. Either outcome is better than endless uncertainty. Follow-up also plays a critical role after agreement. Momentum must continue into implementation. Clear next steps prevent buyer's remorse and reinforce confidence. Early wins validate the decision and strengthen the relationship. Consistency is the hidden advantage of effective follow-up. Many sellers stop too early, assuming silence means no. Those who continue calmly and professionally often win not because they are more persuasive, but because they are more reliable. Follow-up is not about chasing. It is about guiding. It respects the buyer's reality while keeping progress visible. When done well, it feels helpful rather than intrusive. Strong follow-up reflects a mindset shift. The seller is not waiting to be chosen. They are managing a process. This mindset creates confidence and stability, which buyers sense. Over time, disciplined follow-up compounds. Relationships deepen. Trust accumulates. Opportunities expand. What once felt uncomfortable becomes routine. What once felt uncertain becomes predictable. Follow-up is where professionalism shows. It reveals whether selling is being treated as a structured practice or an emotional guessing game. Those who master follow-up build pipelines that are resilient, not fragile. In the next chapter, we will explore how to turn these practices into a repeatable system, one that produces consistent results without burnout, pressure, or reliance on motivation alone. Chapter 10: Building a Repeatable Sales System. Why does selling feel energizing on some days and completely exhausting on others? Why do results fluctuate even when effort seems consistent? In most cases, burnout and inconsistency are not caused by the market or the buyer. They are caused by the absence of a system. When selling relies on emotion, motivation, and improvisation, performance becomes unpredictable. Good days feel great. Bad days feel personal. Over time, This emotional volatility leads to fatigue, frustration, and loss of confidence. A repeatable system removes this instability by replacing guesswork with structure. A system does not eliminate human skill. It supports it. The purpose of a sales system is not to make interactions robotic, but to make execution reliable. When the fundamentals are handled automatically, mental energy is freed for listening, thinking, and decision-making. Burnout often begins with decision overload. Every day, sellers make hundreds of small choices. Who to contact, when to follow up, how to respond, what to prioritize. When these decisions are made reactively, cognitive fatigue accumulates quickly. By midday, clarity drops. By the end of the week, discipline erodes. A sales system removes unnecessary decisions. It defines what happens when a lead enters the pipeline, when a meeting ends, when a proposal is sent, and when silence occurs. Instead of asking what to do next, the seller follows a predefined path. This consistency creates momentum. Time is one of the most underprotected resources in sales. Without structure, urgent tasks crowd out important ones. Email, internal messages, and administrative work consume prime hours. Prospecting and preparation are pushed aside, even though they generate future results. Effective systems use time intentionally. Different activities require different mental states. Prospecting requires focus and resilience. Meetings require presence and curiosity. Administrative work requires accuracy but less creativity. When these activities are mixed randomly, productivity suffers. Separating tasks into dedicated time blocks improves both efficiency and quality. Prospecting done without distraction produces better conversations. Preparation done without interruption leads to sharper insights. Follow-up done consistently prevents pipeline decay. Structure creates rhythm. Rhythm reduces stress. Another critical component of a sales system is process discipline. Discipline does not mean rigidity. It means consistency in execution. Showing up when planned. Following up when scheduled. Preparing before meetings even when motivation is low. Discipline ensures that performance does not depend on mood. Many sellers judge their success by outcomes they cannot fully control. Deals won or lost. Responses received or ignored. While outcomes matter, they are lagging indicators. Focusing exclusively on outcomes creates anxiety because they fluctuate naturally. A healthier and more effective approach is to focus on inputs. Inputs are actions within direct control. Calls made, conversations held, meetings prepared, follow-ups completed. When input quality and quantity are consistent, outcomes stabilize over time. This shift in focus reduces emotional volatility. A day becomes successful not because a deal closed, but because the process was executed correctly. Confidence becomes rooted in behavior rather than results. This emotional stability is essential for long-term performance. Data plays an important role in system-based selling. A well-maintained record of activity reveals patterns that emotion often hides. Where deals stall, where momentum builds, where conversations break down. Data replaces self-criticism with diagnosis. When problems are identified objectively, improvement becomes practical. Weak prospecting leads to pipeline gaps. Weak discovery leads to stalled deals. Weak follow-up leads to lost momentum. Each issue points to a specific skill or process that can be improved. Consistency also depends on reliability. Small commitments matter. Sending materials when promised. Starting meetings on time. Ending meetings on time. Following through on next steps. These behaviors build trust externally and self-trust internally. Self-trust is often overlooked. When sellers repeatedly break promises to themselves, confidence erodes. Systems rebuild self-trust by creating routines that can be honored consistently. Confidence grows from kept commitments. As sales processes scale, systems become even more critical. Without structure, growth creates chaos. Leads fall through cracks. Messages go unanswered. Opportunities are forgotten. Systems preserve quality as volume increases. Technology supports systems, but it does not replace them. Tools are only effective when they reflect a clear process. A customer relationship system is valuable only when it captures real information and defines next actions. When it is treated as an obligation rather than a resource, its value disappears. Clear documentation supports consistency. Notes, next steps, and timelines prevent confusion. They allow momentum to continue even when interruptions occur. They turn complex cycles into manageable sequences. A strong system also includes review and reflection. Improvement requires feedback. Reviewing conversations, outcomes, and activity reveals blind spots. Without reflection, mistakes repeat. With reflection, progress accelerates. Professional sellers treat their craft like a discipline, not a personality expression. They train deliberately. They refine specific skills over time. They seek feedback not to validate themselves, but to improve execution. Burnout decreases when expectations are realistic. Not every prospect will respond. Not every deal will close. Systems absorb rejection without emotional damage. They treat rejection as data rather than failure. Sustainability is the ultimate goal. A sales career is not a sprint. It is a long-term practice. Systems protect energy. They reduce anxiety. They create predictability. Predictability supports confidence. As trust grows in the process, reliance on motivation decreases. Action becomes routine. Progress becomes steady. Results compound quietly. Selling without a system is exhausting because it requires constant emotional regulation. Selling with a system is sustainable because it distributes effort evenly over time. Consistency is not created by intensity. It is created by structure. Structure transforms effort into results. Results reinforce belief. Belief sustains action. In the next chapter, we will explore what mastery looks like over the long term, and how professional sellers continue improving without losing integrity, curiosity, or balance. Chapter 11: Mastery. Becoming a professional seller. What does mastery in selling actually look like after the techniques are learned and the systems are in place? It is not louder confidence, faster talking, or bigger promises. True mastery is quieter. It is calm, controlled, and deliberate. It shows up not in isolated wins, but in sustained performance over time. Many people enter sales thinking of it as a temporary role or a stepping stone. Professionals approach it differently. They treat selling as a craft. Like any craft, it rewards those who commit to long-term improvement rather than short-term tricks. Mastery is not achieved by knowing more tactics. It is achieved by becoming more consistent in how those tactics are applied. The highest performing sellers share a common trait. They are students of their own behavior. They do not assume that experience alone guarantees growth. Experience without reflection simply reinforces habits, good or bad. Improvement requires deliberate practice, which means intentionally working on specific skills rather than relying on repetition alone. Deliberate practice begins with honest self-assessment. Where do conversations break down? At what point does momentum slow? Are objections recurring in similar forms? These patterns reveal skill gaps. Mastery is built by addressing one gap at a time, not by trying to improve everything at once. Skill development in sales is cumulative. Listening improves discovery. Discovery improves value communication. Value communication reduces objections. Reduced objections simplify closing. Each improvement compounds the next. Professionals understand this and resist the urge to skip fundamentals in search of shortcuts. One of the most important skills to master is emotional control. Sales exposes people to frequent rejection, ambiguity, and pressure. Without emotional regulation, these experiences create stress and reactive behavior. Emotional reactions distort judgment. They lead to over-talking, underpricing, and chasing unqualified opportunities. Mastery requires the ability to remain steady regardless of outcome. A lost deal is not a personal failure. A won deal is not proof of superiority. Both are data points. Professionals separate identity from outcome. This separation preserves confidence and prevents burnout. Stoic thinking aligns naturally with professional selling. It emphasizes control over actions rather than outcomes. Sellers cannot control a buyer's decision, timing, or internal politics. They can control preparation, execution, and integrity. Focusing on what is controllable creates psychological stability. This stability allows for patience. Impatience often signals insecurity. When sellers rush conversations or force decisions, it is usually because they feel pressure internally. Mastery replaces urgency with confidence. Confident sellers are willing to wait, clarify, and even walk away. Walking away from poor fit opportunities is a defining trait of professionals. Amateurs chase every possibility. Professionals qualify rigorously. They understand that time spent on misaligned deals is time taken away from real opportunities. Saying no protects focus and reinforces credibility. Integrity is non-negotiable at this level. Short-term gains achieved through exaggeration or omission always carry long-term costs. Trust, once damaged, is difficult to restore. Professionals choose transparency even when it risks losing a deal. Over time, this consistency builds reputation. Reputation compounds quietly. Buyers move companies. Industries overlap. Word spreads. A seller known for honesty, clarity, and professionalism attracts opportunities without chasing them. This is the invisible advantage of ethical selling. Mastery also involves understanding that selling is a transferable life skill. The ability to listen deeply, ask thoughtful questions, frame decisions clearly, and influence without coercion extends beyond business. These skills improve leadership, collaboration, and personal relationships. Professionals invest in continuous learning. They read widely. They study psychology, communication, and decision-making. They review their own conversations and seek feedback. This curiosity keeps skills sharp and perspectives fresh. However, learning without application has limited value. Mastery requires integration. New ideas must be tested, refined, and incorporated into existing systems. Professionals adopt selectively. They do not chase every trend. They evaluate what aligns with their process and values. Consistency over time matters more than intensity in short bursts. Sustainable performance is built through routines that support energy, focus, and clarity. Sleep, health, and boundaries are not separate from performance. They enable it. Burnout often signals misalignment between effort and values. When selling conflicts with personal ethics, stress increases. When actions align with values, effort feels meaningful. Professionals design their careers intentionally, choosing environments that support integrity. Long-term success in sales is not defined by a single year or a single achievement. It is defined by resilience. The ability to adapt to changing markets, evolving buyers, and personal transitions. Systems provide stability during change. Skills provide flexibility. Mastery also requires humility. Markets evolve. Buyers change. What worked before may not work forever. Professionals remain open to adjustment without abandoning core principles. They evolve without compromising integrity. Confidence at this level is quiet. It does not need validation. It is grounded in preparation and experience. This confidence puts buyers at ease. It communicates safety and competence without effort. Ultimately, selling at its highest level is an act of service. It helps people solve problems, make decisions, and move forward with confidence. When done well, it creates value on both sides of the exchange. A professional seller measures success not only by revenue, but by relationships, reputation, and personal growth. They understand that selling is not about taking. It is about contributing. Mastery is not a destination. It is a commitment to continuous improvement, to clarity over complexity, to honesty over hype, to systems over shortcuts. Those who embrace this path build careers that last. They earn trust repeatedly. They grow without burning out. They succeed without compromising who they are. Selling, practiced this way, becomes natural, calm, earned, and deeply effective. You have reached the end of this book, but not the end of the work. Throughout these chapters, one central idea has remained constant. Selling does not require manipulation, pressure, or hype. It does not require tricks, exaggerated confidence, or luck. It requires clarity, discipline, and integrity. When selling is approached as a professional skill rather than a performance, it becomes predictable, ethical, and sustainable. Modern buyers are not looking to be convinced. They are looking to feel safe making decisions in complex and uncertain environments. They want to be understood, not pushed. They want guidance, not persuasion. When you meet buyers at this level, resistance fades and collaboration replaces conflict. You have learned that trust is biological, not abstract. That emotion precedes logic. That clarity reduces fear. That systems outperform talent. And that consistency matters more than intensity. These are not tactics. They are principles. Principles that hold up regardless of industry, market conditions, or personality type. Selling done well is calm. It is deliberate. It is grounded in truth. It allows you to walk away from poor fit opportunities without anxiety. It allows you to challenge assumptions without aggression. It allows you to build a career that compounds over time instead of burning out. This approach to selling does more than improve results. It changes how you see yourself. You stop acting like someone asking for approval and start operating like a professional offering expertise. You stop chasing outcomes and start managing processes. You stop relying on emotion and start relying on systems. The goal was never to give you scripts to memorize or tricks to deploy. The goal was to give you a way of thinking, a framework for making sense of buyer behavior, a structure for executing consistently, and a standard for selling in a way you can stand behind. Mastery is not about perfection. It is about commitment. Commitment to preparation. Commitment to honesty. Commitment to improvement. When you commit to the process, results follow naturally. Selling, at its highest level, is service. It helps people make better decisions. It moves ideas forward. It turns value into reality. When you sell this way, success is not something you chase. It is something you earn. If you would like to read this book on Kindle, please check out the link in the description. Now the responsibility shifts to you. Apply what you've learned. Practice deliberately. Trust the system. And approach every conversation with calm authority. That is how selling becomes natural.